Hello students. Now we are going to see the topic of disaster management. Most importantly WHO. So and hazard is something which by itself or by interacting with other variables can result in. So what we have seen in the previous slide is a disaster. Now what we are seeing is a hazard. Okay. So the hazard will lead to physical injury and also a death. It leads to damage to the assets and also the environment and also loss of production and increased liability. So for example, heights, confined spaces, slippery surfaces, weather and also towards chemicals. Okay. So here you are seeing top 10 populations facing acute exposure to natural hazards, and India it is 82%, which is quite alarming. Okay, so what are the types of disasters? There are basically two types of disasters, which includes natural disasters and then man-made disasters. So what is a natural disaster? It is due to the effect of a natural hazard. So for example, a volcanic eruption or a flood or an earthquake, which leads to financial, environmental and also human losses. Okay, so I hope you also would have come across or you have been a part of some form of natural disasters. And what is this man-made disaster? These are disasters which are mostly happening as a result of man producing, that is man resulting in due to erroneous efforts of man, human beings. That is threats having an element of human intent, negligence or an error. Okay, so what are the types? Basically natural and man-made. The flood, cyclone, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, epidemics and tsunami comes under natural disasters, whereas your air crash, sinking ships, train accidents, building collapse, bomb blast, warfare, chemical explosion, everything comes under man-made disaster. So this is the most important part of disaster chapter, that is the disaster management cycle. So once you come across the disaster impact, the immediate thing is you have to respond and try to recover as much as possible using the principles of triage and try to do a further development and mitigation process. Whereas before all these processes, at any time you have to be in a position to be prepared enough to face a disaster. Okay, which is called as a disaster preparedness. So what are the elements of disaster management cycle? It includes your mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery. That is, under mitigations, measures put in place to minimize the results, and preparedness on planning how to respond. Say for example, your drill, mock-in drill, emergency exercise training, response, that is initial actions taken as the event takes place, whereas recovery, you try to recover or return the community to normal. Okay. So the phases of disaster management includes your preparedness phase, which includes telecommunication, training, mock drilling exercises, early warning signals, proper SOPs, that is standard operating procedures. Whereas in response phase, you should have a proper communication and coordination. And in the recovery phase, you should have proper restoring infrastructure, recovery, rehabilitation of other services, that is integration of services. Okay, which is basically a comprehensive service. And in the mitigation phase, you should have a proper public education, awareness, hazard management and assessment with the improved infrastructure. This is the triage track. Okay, I have to mention to you about what is triage before itself. Whereas you will be classifying the individuals on a disaster site into four categories. That is, those who need immediate attention and delayed attention, those having a minor injuries, and those who are completely diseased. And you will be giving a color coding based on the preferences, where you can with your immediate intervention you can save a major part of their lives, or majority of the people you will be focusing your attention on. Whereas there is one more concept called as reverse triaging, where you will be applying and I think I can give you as a homework for you. Go back and read about what is reverse triaging. Okay. So the categories include immediate, delayed, minimal and expectant. Priority wise, immediate comes as 1 and delayed 2, minimal 3, expectant 4. The conditions of chest wounds, open fracture, burns, everything comes under immediate category, that is color code red. Whereas abdominal wounds, eye and CNS injuries comes as yellow color coded as delayed, and minor burns comes under minimum. Okay, black is basically the diseased one. Mitigation. Okay. So the active and passive mitigation measures include your promotion of desired actions by planning, training, and also by providing the facilities to the refugees by providing proper public information. Whereas in passive measures, you prevent undesired actions by checking complaints of controls on site, court proceedings, fines, control land use, and so on. Okay. So what are the symptoms after disasters? Mostly the physiological symptoms include your fatigue, shock symptoms, profuse sweating, that is what is called as a PTSD, post-traumatic disorder. Okay. And your cognitive symptoms, that is memory loss, reduced attention span, calculation difficulties, confusion. Whereas emotional symptoms includes your anxiety, grief, depression, anticipation of harm, irritability, and behavioral symptoms includes your substance abuse, insomnia, gait change, hypervigilance. Okay. So what are the possible communicable diseases after disasters, which includes your GI-related disorders like cholera, diarrhea, dysentery, and also the other diseases which includes TB, malaria, intestinal parasites, skin infections. And it also post-disasters, there are a lot many expected ecological changes, which includes your vector-borne diseases, altered living conditions, more rampant stray animals, and also damage to public utilities. And also due to population movements, there will be introduction of new disease or vector and interruption in the public health services. Those who have been already availing treatment for communicable and non-communicable diseases, there will be obvious interruption of treatment, including your interrupted immunization services. Whereas altered individual resistance to diseases. Okay. And post-disaster effects, which includes your death, disability, psychological issues, as we have already discussed, and disaster recovery. Okay, for which we are supposed to provide more psychological support, keep them remain alert for environmental health. And regarding man-made disasters, it is a threat having an element of human intention. We have already seen the difference. And we can classify it as nuclear, biological, chemical, fire accidents, RT, and terrorism. Okay, the concept of bioterrorism also comes under man-made disasters. So the classic examples includes your London smog, Al-Mushrak fire, the nuclear power plant explosion in Chernobyl, Kuwait oil fires, and destruction of Aral Sea. Whereas categories include sudden disasters, the classic example being Bhopal gas strategy, and insidious disasters, which includes your insidious chemical and radiation exposures. Okay, it also leads to one more disaster, which includes your global warming. So how can you prevent different types of man-made disasters? So if the disaster has already taken place, then we should bring all people inside the danger zone outside and ensure the disaster comes within control. Okay. So these are the India climatic disasters risk mapping. Okay, you can see and visualize the most important mapping which they have done based on the climatic changes. Now we have to be in a condition to foresee more of climate related disasters, and major disasters in India include your Bhopal gas strategy, earthquake in Uttarkashi, tsunami, train accidents, bomb blast. Okay, so this is a national disaster management structure. You can go back and look at this in a, you can refer this in online also, where it is provided in the Government of India website. And this is the Sendai framework, and which enlists the priorities for action for disasters, and it has highlighted 7 targets to achieve by 2030. And what is the Department for Disaster Management at the national level? It is the Ministry of Agriculture for droughts and Ministry of Health for epidemics. Okay, so thank you so much for your listening to disasters. So kindly go back and read about disasters. Okay, thank you.